All right.
Okay, I think we're up and rolling. Hi, everybody. It's Bob Weathers here with Vitality Project, and I've got my dear friend and esteemed guest, Douglas Prater. Doug Prater, thank you for joining us, Doug.
Great to see you tonight, Bob. Thank you for having me.
You too, Doug. You too. Our topic for tonight is in the context of an ongoing conversation we've been looking at, applying concepts from what's referred to as mind-body bridging. I know you're familiar with that, and I'm attempting to familiarize our listeners and our readers with this model, which is a model for building resilience. And I've come to equate recovery practice in many ways with building resilient skills, and that's not original to me. It's very much embedded throughout the core workbooks of mind-body bridging models. So in that spirit, tonight's conversation with you is about how we might commit to daily resilience practice. And I actually provided a homework exercise in today's post, which would be to invite people to fill out some practice that they found useful in helping them to bounce back from stressful circumstances, rather than go down the rabbit hole that for many of us who are in recovery can lead us back into relapse. And so I just want to talk about it informally with my dear friend for a few minutes tonight, Doug. And so I want to hand the baton to you and invite any reflections you have, and we can dialogue and kind of see where we go, okay?
Yeah, resilience is so key to this whole thing, and ties in so nicely with all the other work we've been doing on mind-body bridging, because it really is such a physical, visceral sensation when you start redlining when the stress comes. And
yeah, that's sad.
There's so many different things that we can do too, and the solution is going to be different for everybody. Solution is probably not the right word, but the different things we can do are different for all of us.
I have a thought about the word solution. May I share this with you?
Sure, please.
This dates back to 25 or 30 years ago, but I presented a paper at a conference. It was the Western Psychological Association. I remember it was in downtown Los Angeles. And at that point, there was a new model of therapy that had developed. It's no longer new, called solution-based approaches to psychotherapy, solution-focused, different terms for it. And I actually taught that material in courses. I was teaching counseling courses. But my paper was on looking at the word solution and how it's typically understood, including that model, is solving a problem. Sure. And what I did is I was also in training at the Jung Institute at that point, and I looked at the word solution the way that Jungians might look at it, and they look at it in its etymological sense, solutio, as in solution, as in dissolve. Yes. It's a very different approach to looking at this. Can I solve a problem heroically from top down, or is there a way for me to skillfully dissolve a problem, maybe in some ways from the bottom up? It's a different way of looking at it, and I've never once made that connection again. Well, not in this context until you spoke of it right now. So we are looking at solutions, as long as we understand solutions maybe in as broad and a deep a way as possible, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's brilliant to bring the alchemical sense of the word into this discussion, because...
Can I just tell you the truth? It wasn't a well-attended presentation. It was esoteric. I cared a lot about it, and I laugh at myself for this. Sometimes I came up with these paper presentations that were just so far off the beaten track. I feel like it's a really important one, but I don't know that many people agreed with me. But let's give him some credit. That's 30 years ago. Maybe it's better now. What do you say? Anyway, Doug, please continue.
I'm
sorry. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So how can we dissolve these stressful situations that could otherwise lead to relapse? Recognizing tension in your body is such a powerful thing. So I was having a fairly intense conversation with my wife last night. Things started to get to a place where we were both about to redline. And the key for me in that moment was, first of all, to just stop immediately, not say another word, not do anything except for focus on taking nice, slow breaths and getting myself back to baseline. Once that adrenaline starts to kick in and all the things, rational thinking can so easily go out the window, and to catch myself in that moment. But that's the trick, is learning how to do it before you get off on the roller coaster, isn't it?
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, Doug. I brought an example too tonight. I know that we'd be talking about this. I had a similar situation on Monday, and it was with my wife. It was my wife, and we had towards the end of the day, had what for me, and I think for her too, was a bruising interaction. And I hadn't felt very well that day, and actually hadn't slept well for a few days. I've had these chronic shoulder problems that lead to pain that sometimes keep me awake at night, and it's been on a roll the last week. And so I snapped at her, and she responded in kind. And I don't know that I had your conscious awareness in the moment. I didn't stop in the moment. It was a brief interaction. It was by phone. We were in different locations, but I had the good sense that night. And I say good sense because I think it was gifted to me to go to bed early. I need not to try to talk into this more right now, because what's at issue is my fatigue. I had some dim awareness. I got up on Tuesday morning and it was so clear to me. In fact, I went for my morning swim on Tuesday morning. And as I was swimming, I was doing some forgiveness practice in and around this interaction with Colleen. And it became so clear to me that why I was redlining and then evoking her redline and so on is that both of us were tired and stressed for different reasons. And I feel like the best thing I could do was go to bed on Monday night and get up and swim on Tuesday morning to kind of discharge some of that energy. And I came back after swimming, and we had a loving interaction that was reparative. And so I was so grateful. I'm so grateful. Doug, if I could count the times that I haven't heeded that and continue to try to work something out, solve something in that red line state, and nothing good ever comes of that in my experience.
That's definitely the temptation for me too. I want to fix it right now, and that always leads to trouble. But sleep is, I was talking about in the moment when you catch yourself redlining, but on a longer time scale, as relapse often is, it's not always just an immediate thing. It's something that kind of builds over time as things go. And taking the time to really rest and clear out your neurochemistry and sleep can make such a huge difference. Not to mention, of course, that's when your subconscious is at work processing so many different things and helping you
absolutely
to figure it out. Just getting away and giving it the space without continuing to push and move forward into what could be a dangerous pathway.
You're reminding me when you're emphasizing, I'm joining you right with this, Doug, about the necessity of sleep. I've forgotten about this. I don't think of it often, but in the early days of my initial recovery, this is 8 years ago, I couldn't sleep, and it was a function of the body and rebound from all of the substances, alcohol and other drugs that I had. This huge kind of cortisol flood is what was going on. I was just bathing adrenaline, couldn't sleep. And I remember ordering a book online. It was on Kindle, and I began reading it. It was written by a sleep researcher who also was an expert in addiction. And I remember reading it. The book, by the way, didn't help me, but it helped me to understand that I've got to find some way to get to sleep. And I was working with an addiction psychiatrist during this time, and we set about right away a way to begin to balance my neurobiology such that I could eventually get back to sleeping through the night. It took me several months to actually get back to normal sleep, but it wasn't like from A to Z. I began to get more and more sleep. And honest to goodness, the healing that came from that sleep, I've never had such a palpable relationship to the necessity and, of course, the benefit, but the necessity of sleep until I was deprived of it, really severely deprived of it for days on end. And I honestly, back to this weekend, it's perfectly applicable. I used to teach this course at the graduate school. Actually, it was one of the first courses I taught. Was a course on psychopathology, and we were studying thought disorders, so call it psychotic thought disorders. And I remember students in class reading this and saying that, by how strange all this sounds, hallucinations and delusions and so on. And I put a test to the class. I said, you guys, let's try an experiment. It was 2 nights a week. I think it was maybe like a Tuesday and a Friday night or something. The class said, let's try an experiment. Tonight, no one gets to sleep. And let's just check in tomorrow. And I said, by tomorrow, some of us are going to be getting pretty doggone cranky, but we'll probably be managing okay, a little bit of coffee or whatever like that. Okay. But then you don't get to sleep the next night. In fact, let's not sleep until I see you on Friday, 3 nights from now. And I said, It won't be all of us, but I guarantee you that some of us will have seriously lost our minds by then. We'll be, psychology calls it cognitive slippage. What a perfect term. And I said, and if it's not by this Friday, let's not sleep to the following Friday. Right. Every one of us will have an intimate firsthand relationship to psychotic thought processes. Yeah. And I said this because I want you to realize that what we study in this class on psychopathology, we're all that close to it. It's all, as you and I've talked about, it's all on the continuum. It's just a matter of how depressed I am, how anxious I am, for that matter, how psychotic I am, how addicted I am, and so on like that. But you remind me of it, and the test was sleep, because there's all these studies, you're aware of them, and I am too, is that without sleep, our bodies and our psyches erode, and it's amazing how quickly they do.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that makes the acute phase of withdrawals so difficult, is that so much of the time it's sleep is one of the first things to go, and that's exactly what your body needs to repair itself. And then of course the following day when the sunlight comes up, your circadian rhythm tells you that it's okay to be awake. So it's not necessarily that you're tired then. You can be wakeful the next day while sleep deprived, but the functioning has deteriorated so far. The border of psychopathology, as you said. And
I might need to get a brown paper bag as I'm listening to you, because I'm going to move into a full-blown panic attack right now remembering this. I'm exaggerating, but it really is. It really brings back that. And I know you know it firsthand. In fact, I want to say this out of compassion to anybody who's listening that is in recovery from severe addiction, is that I lead multiple groups every week, and I've done that for years in Southern California. And I not infrequently will ask in the group, how many of you are suffering from insomnia? And it won't be everybody. There's some people that are spared it, and it depends on their biology. And frankly, it depends on the course of their addiction and so on. But the vast majority, every single time, that's their primary concern, is they cannot sleep. And some of these settings will give medications that put you to sleep, but then you're left with the side effects of feeling groggy and stoned and everything. So that's not, there's not a simple solution to it, but it's like a number one priority, just getting your physiology on board. Can I just please sleep through the night sometime soon, dear God? And so it's a universal. And I want to say this out of compassion to anybody here, and also your loved ones, is that this goes with the territory. Doug and I are talking about interactions with our respective wives that have been really dicey, owing to needing to take a break and breathe, or needing to rest our minds, our bodies. I'm talking about sleep. It just goes with the territory in acute recovery, as well as in longer term, or what they call post-acute withdrawal, is that what goes hand in hand with that is the symptom of needing rest. And all the more reason then you started by talking about just taking a spot to breathe, find a way to recenter. For me, it was literally going to sleep. But these ways of moving from what we've been talking about, from red alert brain to resting brain, is not theoretically, it's not theoretical. There's cash value in practicing these things.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And the post-acute phase too is so critical, because it takes a lot longer than you might think. You'd think once the withdrawals are over that everything's better. And you know as well as I do that your physiology is so out of whack that post-acute phase can last for a long, long time. And that's when we really need the resilience skills, when our old coping mechanisms no longer work. They're too problematic. We have to find different ways to do it. Balancing the physiology through sleep. I'm a huge advocate for movement and exercise, and proper nutrition, making sure that really taking care to give our bodies what they need to get back to baseline or above really can make a big difference in making sure that we don't slip back where we don't want to be.
Really want to underscore what you're saying, Doug. I wish that I'd had you in my life at that point when I was entering into early recovery, because I was completely ignorant of post-acute withdrawal syndrome, the symptoms of which were emotional and cognitive and physical and relational. I mean, it was just comprehensive. It affected everything in my life. And I thought that when I stopped drinking and drugging that I was good to go, or I thought I'd be relatively good to go once I was through the acute withdrawal. And that piece took me a while, because I was doing a taper on one of the drugs I'd been addicted to. And so it took a while. But I really thought that when I was done with that, after the first 2 or 3 months, that I was good to go. And it really blindsided me, Doug. I mean, and the worst of it for me, we talked about, interactions with our significant others. The worst of it was for me in close relationships, because I was just so emotionally labile. I was all over the place and I couldn't figure it out. I thought I'd lost my mind. And I'm quite sure that Colleen, who's now my wife, but who was then my partner, God help her, I'm quite sure that she was convinced I'd lost my mind, and anybody else that knew me. In fact, I have a number of people. My sponsor in AA has confirmed that he said he thought I had lost my mind. Sponsoring me. It's like I was just psycho boy, and it was supposed to give withdrawal in hindsight. So I think it's really important to hear what you're saying just about this entity, because it's not popularly known. I didn't know it professionally. I didn't have enough background in addiction to know that this goes part and parcel of it. And clients will always ask me, they say, well, how long is it, Dr. Bob? And I'll say, for me, it was 9 months. I can date that pretty closely to feel like I finally had a critical mass of Bob back to where I wasn't just all over the map. But up to 2 years for people. I have a friend who was severely addicted to opioids, and it took him 2 years, took him 3 years to sleep through the night. That's an amazing, but he had a very, very severe addiction. So it's just to not only for those who are in recovery, but loved ones to have perspective. This is a long commitment. It's a long arc, and there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And as I said earlier, you don't go from all to nothing or from nothing to all. There's gradual improvement, but it took me a long time. It took me 9 months to begin to feel like I was reliably myself inside my own skin.
And to further complicate the issue, of course, being sober during that post-acute phase, that's when you begin to get your mind back and really realize with clarity that maybe we lacked in addiction the wreckage that we've caused and the mess that we've made, the things that are likely to trigger us that we're now more aware of and don't have the emotional skill set necessarily, the resilience skills or the practical management techniques to appropriately handle that. And that's why it's so important to focus on these things and learn some of the things. We mentioned breathing, we mentioned sleeping. One of the other things that I found just incredibly valuable is to journal out my thoughts. And again, this is not immediately in the moment when you're redlining, but when things start to get slippery in post-acute withdrawals, it's amazing what just writing some things down or calling a friend can do.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you. I feel like it's really wisdom. I've always had this private embarrassment about being such a lousy journaler. and I'm talking to you, a writer. So I've really outed myself, but I just really struggled with this from childhood on. I remember at Christmas, every Christmas or two, I'd get a diary. I can remember getting one with a little lock on it and how voluminous it felt. And I'm going to write in that every day. And I never could do that. I just never did that worth beans. And I've had some periods of my time where I would keep dream journals and done a decent job. But for the most part, I haven't. I'm pleased to report to you, my friend, that in recent weeks, I've gone back to writing, journaling in the morning as part of my quiet time. It's brief what I do, but the most meaningful part for me is I write a poem every morning. I write and my poem is my journaling, and so it's non-prose, it's that languaging, but that languaging is closer sometimes to my experience. I'm embarrassed to tell you this, Doug. It's been 25 years since I wrote poetry regularly. I used to write it fairly regularly. And I guess I'm going to be Exhibit A for It's Never Too Late.
Yes.
To change it. Okay.
Well, poetry is such a brilliant practice anyway. I want to get off on a whole tangent now about the metaphorical language and the way it challenges our brain and changes our consciousness to read and to write. And poetry is a beautiful thing. But journaling for me, I would never publish my journals. I'm not one of those who's writing a memoir for anybody but myself to read. It's purely therapeutic and purely for myself. Usually first thing in the morning is when it makes sense for me to do it. But it ties in so nicely with the lack of sleep too. When anxiety, when intrusive thoughts, when those kind of things are triggering the anxiety, as they often do in post-acute recovery, then writing things down instead of laying there ruminating can be so powerful to just get it out of the head.
Yeah. I sometimes talk about this with clients this way, is that if our emotional center of our brain is in between these earbuds in our midbrain. That roiling in there are our fears and anxieties and resentments, all that material. Is that if we can get it out to the frontal cortex, which is what's required to write something. And you also mentioned talking. If I talk to you about what's going on, I'm already moving it into a frontal cortex thing, which is beginning to access my executive center. Otherwise, I've just got this running wild, my emotional center. So just the act of speaking it to you, Doug, in real time is a movement towards frontal traction. The same thing in writing it. I feel like writing it out is actually takes my frontal cortex to be able to write, because you don't write with your emotional center. Your emotional center is by definition subcortical. It does not write. It does not speak. It just it compels us to maybe react, but it doesn't. It's not able to access it. So it's a gift to our brains and our bodies and our souls, I think, to do what you're talking about. Reach out to another person. I think it's one of the geniuses of self-help support groups, whether it's 12-step or refuge recovery or smart recovery, is that you're talking about your emotional stuff, oftentimes shameful material, or like you said, wreckage of the past. You're talking about it rather than barbecuing in it within. So I really support what you're talking about, whether it's writing it or communicating it orally.
Yeah. And of course, early in my recovery, and to some degree still, I didn't have a large social network that I could rely on. There weren't very many people that I could call. So writing became really one of the only outlets to do that.
Yeah.
And with my battered self-esteem and sense of self and everything else that had utterly collapsed through the wreckage of addiction, writing things down in a journal also allowed me, just by nature of the way things flowed, to start to think of solutions, to remind myself of times when I had overcome problems in my life, and to get back into that place of empowerment just by naturally writing those ideas down, which built momentum over time and made a profound difference.
It's beautiful. I'm really glad it's gone this direction, because it's something I don't emphasize enough, or we don't emphasize enough here at the Vitality Project, and I want to be more explicit about it. It's really, this is gold. This is good. Doug, this conversation will continue on for sure. I'm grateful for your presence tonight, and just we're talking about building daily resilience practice, turning these into positive habits, and this is how I as I wrote in the post today, the time to build this is not when we're in that red alert zone, or like you said, redlining. It's to do it is when we've got some reserves, so that we've got this to rely on. It's just like an athletic skill or a musical skill, or any skill for that matter. Both you and I are athletes and musicians. It's like developing a reflex. You don't want to do it during the heat of the moment. Do it when you're not in the heat of the moment. Right. So you have access to it when you are. So that's the wish here, whether it's writing, breathing, sleeping, exercising, eating, meditating, all of that. Yeah, really, really key. Doug, I want to thank you for your presence tonight. Thank you. I know it's late where you are. I wish you a good night's rest, my dear friend. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. You're very welcome. It's a pleasure having you. Good night, Doug.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.